is gay liberation? Gay liberation is a movement, was a movement for the complete sexual liberation of all people, as we said. And in order to do that, we believed that we had to abolish all existing social institutions, including marriage, church, and state. Well, you got to understand, we were we were very much anarchists. So I'm not sure that there really was an agenda per se. I mean, I think Martha Shelley in my book talks a little bit about the agenda of gay liberation, but I'm not clear on what that agenda was. I mean, we certainly were about struggling with all other peoples and struggling for the liberation of all people. You know, we worked with the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, radical feminists, the anti-war movement, the hippies, the yippies, everybody. I mean, we were those people. We came from all those places. So I really think a large part of our agenda was we wanted to get rid of religion. We hated the state. We hated the imposition of rules and authority on us. We wanted to create a new world that wasn't about rules and laws and control of our bodies and our minds. The state and the church and all those institutions were oppressing us and very much kept us enslaved to their systems. There were laws against sodomy, so gay men could be busted for just being sexual. Cruising areas, gay men could be busted at cruising areas because there were laws against our sexuality. We had no civil rights in this system, so we could be discriminated against in jobs. We could be thrown out of housing. We could be refused service at restaurants. And these things happened all the time. If you were an effeminate man or a butch woman, you could very easily be thrown out of a restaurant. Just walking in there, you could be thrown out. Of course, we couldn't marry. Not that I wanted to ever, but we couldn't marry. Religion thought we were sinners at best. And, you know, at worst, they saw us as child predators and molesters. Ironically, of course, it turned out the Catholic Church was full of the child predators, not us. So, I mean, everywhere we turned, the American Psychiatric Association considered that homosexuality was a disease. Psychologists, shrinks, all the mental health professionals considered homosexuality a disease. So we were criminals, we were sinners, and we were diseased. We were mentally diseased. You know, why would we want to preserve any of these institutions, given all that? You know, and we were coming out of radical movements. You know, I was part of SDS. When I went to college, the first thing I did was join the SDS chapter, you know, and then I got involved with gay liberation. It was a struggle with a lot of these movements. The Black Panthers reached out to us. There was the famous letter by Huey Newton, which of course is also in my book. I hate to keep plugging my book. But Huey Newton's letter about women's liberation and gay liberation, in which he says gays and feminists are revolutionary peoples and should be embraced by the Black Panthers. That was a huge, huge thing in 1970 for the Black Panthers to embrace us. Radical feminism, yeah, there were some struggles. You know, the Lavender Menace, a bunch of dykes took over a NOW convention at one point because Betty Friedan and a lot of those people had a lot of problems with lesbians. They didn't want people to think that the women's movement was a bunch of lesbians, even though a lot of them were. So it took the Lavender Menace to sort of get the radical feminism on its track. The same with the anti-war movement. There were skirmishes. I remember in Philadelphia, I was involved with the Gay Liberation Front, and we used to go to the be-ins, these huge be-ins that the anti-war movement would have in Fairmount Park, and we would set up our big Gay Liberation Front banner, and we'd proceed to sit there and make out with each other and grope each other and all this other stuff. And we get leftists coming up to us all the time saying, "Why are you doing that? What are you doing? You can't do that here. This is," you know, meanwhile, they were groping their girlfriends and making out and doing the same thing, you know, smoking joints, but we couldn't do it because we were queer. So there was a double standard, but we struggled, and it changed because then leftist magazines, the Village Voice, had to be taught a lesson because they had a problem, and Gay Liberation Front zapped them because they wouldn't use the word gay. They wouldn't allow the word gay in personal ads. And they would run these columns by these homophobes talking about the fairies and the butch dykes, and we had to teach them a lesson, and we did. So yeah, it wasn't love at first sight, but we changed all that pretty quickly. I think Gay Liberation Front turned it around really fast. But I know in Philly we had these social events that were actually just excuses to have a party and get stoned and do S&D, and there was always a back room where anything happened, and it did. Masses of bodies just entwined in the back room. But that was part of gay liberation because we were coming out of the 50s and 60s, which were very repressive sexually. You know, there was the hippie movement, but the hippie movement wasn't the whole country. So we gave our contribution to the sexual revolution, which was the same-sex stuff. That was our contribution, because the hippies weren't doing the gay stuff. They were doing, some of them were doing the gay stuff, but not openly. But we contributed the wild gay orgies to the sexual revolution. As I remember it, it was a political statement, because it was saying that by being out and open about our sexuality and our love for each other, we were going to change the world. It was almost like, I mean, I know people used to talk about the Greeks and the lovers that would go into battle, the same-sex lovers who would go into battle together. You know, and I always hated that image, because I'm a pacifist, and I was always anti-war, and it was like, oh wait, we don't want to glorify war, you know. So there was that. And there was also this wonderful poem. Oh God, if I can remember who it was by, that circulated at the time, which was about guy in the U.S. military in Vietnam who leaves his, who goes AWOL and winds up in bed with a Viet Cong soldier. And it was very sensual and very explicitly sexual. And I remember that poem was just wonderful. And it got circulated all over the place. So that kind of also became part of the army of lovers, that we were gonna go AWOL from the military. That was sort of the more radical interpretation of army of lovers, that we were gonna go AWOL from these military, all the militaries in the world, and we were gonna make love with the enemies. We were gonna have sex with them. A zap was a confrontation with somebody unexpected. The whole idea of a zap was, it was unexpected. So we would target, like we did a zap. I helped organize a zap against Walter Cronkite. And what we did was we planned for weeks. We got fake ID, and we called CBS and said, we got 2 journalism students from Temple University who want to come and observe the news they're studying, and blah, blah, blah. And we got them in, got Mark Siegel and Harry Langhorne in, and we got them fake ID, because we had a guy who could do Photoshop before there was a Photoshop. And this guy was amazing how he could fake an ID. And they got into the studio. And once they got in the studio, at the right moment, Mark leaped in front of the camera and had a banner that said "Gay Rights Now." And the news blacked out for like 30 seconds. The news blacked out. And they grabbed him, they arrested him and Harry, and they were charged with whatever, trespassing and blah, 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 blah. The charges eventually got dropped. But that was a zap. That was a classic zap. So the people you're targeting don't know, because usually when you do a demonstration, you do a press release. Everybody knows you're going to do it. The people you're targeting know you're going to come there at such and such a time and march around in circles. But zaps were not like that. And we did that all the time. Mike Douglas, you probably don't know Mike Douglas. Mike Douglas was like a daytime show, filmed in Philadelphia, very popular. Mark did the same thing. We got Mark into the studio. I was kind of in the background helping to get Mark into the studio. And then he had a banner and did his whole thing, but he chained himself to Mike Douglas's camera. So they couldn't get rid of him right away. So he got to actually, Tony Bennett was on the show that day. It's Tony Bennett, I forget, some actress. So that was classic zaps. I think in terms of GAA, where we are now is probably more in sync with their philosophy. But in terms of GLF, no. I mean, the whole emphasis on gay marriage is sort of the antithesis of what GLF. GLF, as I remember it, our philosophy was the state has no business marrying anybody. Marriage should go. Marriage is oppressive to women. It was always about property rights as an institute, and the whole collusion of religion with the state in marriage and religion. No, as far as we were concerned, no, marriage has to go. So I think as a GLFer, I look at this whole marriage thing as, yeah, of course I think people should be allowed to get married, of course. But the other side of me is saying, but why? Why do we want to? Why do we want to be part of that institution? We should just get rid of it. It doesn't work for straight people. 60% divorce rate in California. Do we want to save that? And child custody battles and ugly divorces and what are we buying? So I think in terms of GLF would look at, gays in the military? Please. Our whole thing was get rid of the military. Like, why do we want to be part of the military? That would never have been on the agenda of anybody in GLF. GAA, yes, because GAA was more about, we need to fit into the system. Yeah, we need to reform the system. And that was always, for me, a conflict, because I was more with, let's get rid of the military. And then I would go to GAA meetings and they're talking about, let's meet with the police because, maybe we could bring the police around. And GLF's view of the police was pigs. Damn pigs, get them out of here. So it was like night and day in many ways. And I think GAA's philosophy has prevailed.